The crystal vase slipped from Elena's fingers. She lunged forward, catching it inches from the marble floor, her heart hammering. The sleeve of her uniform rode up her arm as she straightened, revealing the jagged scar that ran from her wrist to her elbow. "Careful." The voice came from behind her. Cold, clipped. Elena spun around, yanking her sleeve down. "I'm sorry, Mr. Blackwood. It won't happen again." Marcus Blackwood stood in the doorway of his office, a silhouette of expensive tailoring and barely contained irritation. He'd been her employer for exactly 3 days, and in those 3 days, he'd spoken to her exactly 4 times. Each time, his tone had made it clear she was an inconvenience he tolerated because the agency sent her. "The Vanderbilt dinner is tonight," he said, not looking at her. "I need the study organized before—" He stopped mid-sentence. Elena followed his gaze. He was staring at her arm, more specifically at the spot where her sleeve had ridden up again as she set down the vase. The scar was visible, pink and raised against her brown skin. His face went white. Papers slipped from his hands, scattering across the hardwood floor like falling snow. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He stood frozen, one hand gripping the doorframe as if it was the only thing keeping him upright. "Mr. Blackwood?" Elena bent to gather the papers. "Are you all right? Should I call someone?" He didn't answer. His eyes were locked on her arm, wide and unblinking. She'd seen that look before, on the faces of people who'd witnessed accidents. Shock. Recognition. Something between the two. "Sir." He blinked. Once. Twice. Then turned and walked back into his office without a word, closing the door behind him with a soft click that felt louder than a slam. Elena stared at the closed door, her pulse still racing. What just happened? She looked down at her arm, at the scar she'd carried for 20 years, the one that ached when it rained, the one she usually kept hidden under long sleeves, not because she was ashamed, but because people always asked questions she didn't want to answer. Through the door, she heard something crash, then silence. If you're wondering what just happened, so was Elena, but sometimes the past has a way of finding you even when you've spent years running from it. If you're intrigued, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to our channel. Trust me, you'll want to see where this goes. Elena finished her work in silence, her hands moving on autopilot as she dusted shelves and straightened books she couldn't afford to buy. The Blackwood estate wasn't just wealthy, it was the kind of wealthy that made you feel small just by existing in the same space. Crystal chandeliers, marble, everything. Art that probably cost more she'd earn in her lifetime. She'd taken the job because she needed it, because the agency had been clear. Marcus Blackwood paid well, didn't ask questions, and left his staff alone. Perfect for someone like her who'd learned that rich people's indifference was better than rich people's attention. But that look on his face. The office door opened. Marcus stood there, composed now. The scattered papers were gone. His expression was carefully neutral, the mask back in place. But his hands, Elena noticed, were shaking. "We need to talk," he said. Elena's stomach dropped. She'd been fired from enough jobs to recognize the tone. "If it's about the vase, I promise it won't." "It's not about the vase." He paused, and something flickered across his face, something that looked almost like pain. "That scar on your arm? Where did you get it?" The question hit her like a punch. People didn't usually ask directly. They stared, they whispered, they made assumptions, but they didn't ask. "An accident. A long time ago." "How long?" "Does it matter?" "It matters." His voice was rough now, urgent. "Please, how long ago?" Elena's throat tightened. There was something in his eyes that made her want to run, and something else that made her want to stay. She recognized desperation when she saw it. She'd worn it herself too many times. 20 years. I was 8. The color drained from his face again. He took a step forward, then stopped himself, as if remembering the distance between employer and employee, between a billionaire and a maid. What happened? The question came out barely above a whisper. Elena's hand moved instinctively to her arm, covering the scar through the fabric. She hadn't talked about this in years, hadn't let herself think about it. The memory was a door she'd nailed shut and buried under a decade of survival. "Why do you want to know?" "Because—" He stopped, started again. "Because I think— Have we met before?" The question should have been absurd. A man like him, a woman like her, their worlds didn't overlap, couldn't overlap. He lived in penthouses and private jets. She lived in a studio apartment with a radiator that only worked half the time. But something in his eyes made her look closer, really look. And for just a moment, beneath the expensive haircut and the tailored suit and the carefully constructed walls of wealth and power, she saw something, a flicker of something familiar, something that made her heart stutter. No, it couldn't be. "I don't think so, Mr. Blackwood." Her voice came out steady, even as her world tilted. "I would remember." "Would you?" He took another step closer. "If someone changed, if they looked different, if 20 years had passed." Elena's hands were trembling now. She clasped them behind her back, a habit from childhood. "Don't let them see you shake. Don't let them see you break." "I should get back to work." "Wait." His hand shot out, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel the heat of it. "Please, just tell me what happened, how you got that scar." She should have said no, should have walked away, should have kept that door nailed shut. But there was something in his voice, something broken and desperate and achingly familiar. So she told him. "There was a fire," she said quietly, "at the place where I lived, an orphanage outside the city. I was trying to get out, but there was a boy, younger than me. He was trapped near a window. The glass had shattered and he was trying to climb through, but he'd cut himself. He was bleeding and crying and—" Her voice caught. "I pulled him through. The glass cut my arm pretty bad, but we both got out." Marcus's hand was pressed against his mouth. His eyes were bright with unshed tears. "What happened to the boy?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Elena shrugged, trying to keep her tone light even as the old grief pressed against her ribs. "I'm okay," she said softly, because what else could she say?
Marcus looked at her with eyes that had seen too much and understood more. "No," he said gently, "you're not. But you will be. I promise." That word, promise, hit her like a physical thing, because she remembered now. Remembered a boy with a gap-toothed smile who'd found her crying behind the orphanage one night, terrified because she'd overheard the director saying she was too old, too difficult, that no one would ever adopt her. And that boy had taken her hand and said, "When I grow up, I'm going to be rich, and I'm going to come back for you. I promise." She'd laughed, because what else do you do when you're 8 years old and the world has already taught you that promises mean nothing? But she'd held his hand back, and she'd said, "Okay." Now that boy was standing in front of her, a man who'd kept growing long after she'd stopped believing in promises, and she didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so she did both. We're just getting started. If you want to see how this impossible reunion unfolds, make sure you're subscribed, because what happens next will either break your heart or heal it. Maybe both. Marcus couldn't stop staring at her. Elena sat across from him in his office, perched on the edge of a leather chair that probably cost more than her rent. She tucked her hands under her legs, a nervous habit she'd had since childhood. Some things, it seemed, never changed. "I don't understand," she said quietly. "The Blackwoods, they're one of the wealthiest families in the country. How did you end up with them?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "They were looking for a replacement." "A replacement?" "Their son died 2 years before they found me. Car accident. They wanted someone around the same age, same build, someone they could—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Someone they could shape into what they'd lost." Elena's eyes widened. "That's calculated." "Yes." Marcus's voice was flat. "But they gave me everything. Education, opportunities, this." He gestured around the office, and Elena couldn't tell if the gesture was grateful or bitter. Maybe both. "I'm not complaining. I know how lucky I was." Lucky? The word tasted wrong in Elena's mouth. Compared to staying in the system? Yes, lucky. He looked at her, really looked at her. "What happened to you after they closed Riverside?" Elena's throat went tight. "Does it matter?" "Elena." The way he said her name, soft, careful, like he was afraid it might break, made something in her chest hurt. She looked away, focusing on the window behind him. The view probably cost more than most people made in a year. I bounced around. Foster homes. Some were okay, some weren't. Aged out at 18, got a job, got an apartment, kept my head down. She shrugged, like those 10 words contained a decade of struggle. Made it work. Marcus's hands curled into fists on his desk. You were alone. We were all alone. That's what happens when you're a foster kid. I could have found you if I tried harder, if I'd... You were 8 years old, Marcus. She said his name carefully, testing how it felt on her tongue. Strange and familiar at the same time. What were you supposed to do? Something. Anything. His voice cracked. Do you remember what I told you that night behind the orphanage? Elena's breath caught. She remembered. God help her, she remembered everything. It had been 3 weeks after the fire. They'd moved all the kids to a temporary facility while they figured out where to place everyone permanently. Elena had been sitting behind the building, knees pulled to her chest, trying to cry quietly because crying loudly got you labeled as a problem. Marcus had found her anyway. He'd been smaller than the other boys his age, skinny and quiet, but he'd sat down next to her without hesitation, like sitting next to someone's sadness didn't scare him at all. Why are you crying? He asked. Elena wiped her face. I heard the director talking. She said I'm too old, that families want babies, not 8-year-olds, that I'll probably be here until I'm grown. Marcus frowned, processing this with the seriousness of a child trying to understand adult cruelty. Then he reached over and took her hand. When I grow up, I'm going to be really, really rich, like so rich I can buy a huge house with 100 rooms, and you can live there too. We'll have cookies whenever we want, and no one will tell us what to do. Elena laughed through her tears. That's not how it works. Yes, it is. I'll make it work. He squeezed her hand tighter. I promise, when I'm rich, I'm coming back for you. And Elena, desperate and 8 years old and so tired of being unwanted, had looked at his serious little face and felt something warm bloom in her chest.
Okay, she'd whispered. Not because she believed him, but because in that moment, pretending felt better than giving up. 2 days later, a couple in expensive clothes had walked into the facility. They'd looked at Marcus, only at Marcus. Within a week, he was gone. Elena had waited at first. Weeks turned into months, and she told herself he'd come back, that he'd remember, that promises meant something. But he never came. And eventually, Elena learned what every foster kid learns. You save yourself, or you don't get saved at all. I remember, she said now, her voice barely audible. Marcus stood abruptly and moved to the window. His shoulders were rigid, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. I tried, Elena. I swear I tried. But the Blackwoods didn't want me looking back. They wanted me to be their son. Marcus Blackwood, not Marcus Chin. They said the past would only hurt me, that I needed to let it go and move forward. So you did? No, he turned, and the look in his eyes was fierce. I'd looked for 3 years. I hired people, called every agency, every facility. But the fire destroyed all the records, and everyone had scattered. I was just a kid with rich parents who thought I was being ungrateful. His voice broke. I'm sorry. I'm so damn sorry. Elena felt heat behind her eyes. She'd spent 20 years building walls, teaching herself not to hope, not to need, not to remember that once someone had promised to come back. And here he was, the boy who'd promised, the man who'd tried. You were a child, she said again. We both were. But I'm not a child now. Marcus crossed the room and knelt in front of her chair. I'm telling you, Elena, that promise I made 20 years ago, I'm keeping it. I know it's late. I know I can't give you back the time or fix what happened, but I can give you everything else. Elena's throat tightened. You don't owe me anything. This isn't about owing. This is about keeping a promise to the girl who saved my life. His eyes were bright with unshed tears. Please, let me try. She wanted to say yes, wanted to fall into the fantasy of being rescued, of someone swooping in and fixing everything. but she'd learned the hard way that help from rich people always came with strings. "What do you want from me?" she asked quietly. Marcus looked like she'd slapped him. "Nothing. I want nothing except the chance to make this right. People don't do something for nothing. I'm not people." His hand hovered near hers, not quite touching. "I'm the kid who made you a promise, and you're the girl who saved him. That's not nothing, Elena. That's everything." She stared at their hands, his scarred, hers scarred. Two pieces of the same moment carried forward through 20 years of different lives. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "Do what?" "Trust, hope," she swallowed hard. "Believe that someone actually came back." Marcus's voice was gentle. "Then don't believe it yet. Just stay. Let me prove it. Give me a chance to show you that sometimes promises do come true, even if they're 20 years late." Elena had spent 2 decades learning to expect nothing, to need nothing, to survive on her own because survival was all she had. But sitting here, looking at the boy who'd become a man who'd searched for her, who'd remembered, who'd kept that promise locked in his heart, maybe, just maybe. "Okay," she said, the same words she'd said 20 years ago behind that orphanage, but this time something was different. This time it felt dangerously close to hope. Marcus exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for years. "Thank you." The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything they weren't saying. Then Elena spoke, her voice small. "There was something else, that night. Do you remember?" Marcus tilted his head. "What do you mean?" Elena's cheeks flushed. "After you made your promise. About coming back when you were rich." "Yeah?" "I said," she took a breath, "I said, if you really came back, if you really got rich and remembered me, then I'd marry you." The words hung in the air. Marcus stared at her. "You remember that?" "We made a pinky promise, called it our secret plan." Elena couldn't look at him. "I know it was stupid. We were just kids and—" "I remember." His voice was hoarse. "I remember everything, Elena. Every word, every promise." She finally looked up, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. It wasn't pity. It wasn't obligation. It was something else entirely. "I'm not holding you to a promise made by an 8-year-old, she said quickly. "That's not why I brought it up. I just wanted you to know that I remembered, that it mattered to me, even if— What if I want to keep that promise too?" Elena's heart stopped. "What?"
You heard me. Marcus's eyes held hers. What if I told you that marrying the girl who saved my life, who believed in me when no one else did, who's been in my heart for 20 years, what if I told you that sounds like the best decision I could ever make? Marcus, you can't just— I'm not saying tomorrow. I'm not saying we rush into anything. His voice was steady now, sure. I'm saying let me prove it. Let me show you that some promises are worth keeping. All of them. Elena couldn't breathe. This was crazy. Impossible. You didn't just find someone after 20 years and pick up where you left off. Life didn't work that way. But looking at Marcus, at the certainty in his eyes, at the way he was looking at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life, maybe life could work that way. Just this once. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Me too," he smiled, and for a moment she saw the 8-year-old boy she remembered. "But I think that's okay. We'll figure it out together." Together? When was the last time Elena had been part of a together? "Okay," she said for the second time, and this time she almost believed it. If this story is pulling at your heartstrings, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, smash that like button, and drop a comment telling me what you think is going to happen next, because trust me, we're just getting to the good part. The past is one thing, but the present, that's where things get complicated. Elena didn't go back to cleaning that day. Marcus insisted she sit with him, and for the first time in her adult life, she let someone else take care of things.
He ordered food, too much food, like he was trying to make up for 20 years of missed meals in a single afternoon. They sat across from each other at his dining table, and it felt surreal, wrong almost, like she was playing a role in someone else's life. "You don't have to do this," she said, gesturing at the spread. Thai food, Italian, Chinese. He'd ordered from 3 different restaurants because he didn't know what she liked. "I know," Marcus pushed the Thai pod toward her, "but I want to." Elena picked at the noodles. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable exactly, but it was full of years and questions and all the things they'd both survived alone. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said finally. "Okay. Why did you take this job? Working for me, I mean. The agency must have told you who I was." Elena shrugged. "They said you paid well and didn't bother the staff. That was enough." "That's it? That's all you wanted?" "That's all I could afford to want. I learned a long time ago not to look for more than that." Something flickered across Marcus's face. Pain, maybe, or guilt. "I'm going to change that." "Marcus!" "I mean it." He leaned forward. "You're not just my employee anymore. You're not working here, not like this. I'll pay you, hell, I'll pay you double what the agency was giving you, but you're not cleaning my house, Elena. You're—" He stopped, searching for words. "You're family. You've always been family." The word hit her harder than she expected. Family. She'd been alone so long she'd forgotten what that word was supposed to mean. "I don't need charity." "It's not charity. It's—" Marcus ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "Do you remember what you said to me after you pulled me through that window?" Elena frowned. "I don't—" "You said, 'We look out for each other now. That's what family does.'" His voice cracked. "You were 8 years old, and you just saved my life, and you were bleeding, and you still took the time to tell me we were family. So no, Elena, this isn't charity. This is me finally being able to look out for you the way you looked out for me." Elena's vision blurred. She blinked hard, but the tears came anyway. "Hey," Marcus was up and around the table before she could protest. "Hey, it's okay." "It's not okay." Her voice broke. "Nothing about this is okay. You got out, Marcus. You got the life you deserved. And she gestured at herself, at her uniform, at everything she'd become. "I'm nobody. I clean houses for rich people who don't even know my name. And now you're here, and you're successful, and you're kind. And all I can think is that you could have had a different life if you hadn't wasted 3 years looking for me." "Stop." Marcus was firm. "Stop right there. Looking for you wasn't a waste. You weren't a waste. Elena, do you have any idea how many nights I lay awake wondering if you were okay, if you were safe, if someone was taking care of you?" He took her hands, and his grip was steady. "Finding out you're alive, that you're here, that I get a second chance to keep my promise, that's not a waste. That's everything." She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him so badly it hurt. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered again. "Neither do I." Marcus smiled, and it was small but real. "But we'll figure it out together. Remember?"
Elena nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. They stayed like that for a moment, hands clasped, scars aligned. 2 kids who'd survived a fire and 20 years of different kinds of burning. "There's something I need to tell you," Marcus said quietly, "about what happened after the Blackwoods took me." Elena tensed. "Okay? They were good to me, I want you to know that. They gave me opportunities I never would have had, but they also—" He paused. "They wanted me to forget, to leave Marcus Chin behind and become their son completely. They discouraged me from asking about my past, about Riverside, about the other kids. They said it was for my own good, that holding on to trauma would only hurt me. But you didn't forget." "No." His voice was fierce. "I couldn't. Every time I looked at this," he touched his scar, "I remembered. I remembered the fire, the fear, the glass, and I remembered you, the girl who didn't leave me behind." Elena's chest tightened. "I couldn't leave you. You were so small and you were scared and—" Her voice broke. "You reminded me of my little brother." Marcus froze. "You had a brother?" "I did, once." Elena's hands trembled in his. "He died when I was 6. House fire.
My mom got me out, but she went back for him and—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "When I saw you trapped by that window, all I could think was that I couldn't let it happen again. I couldn't lose another little boy to fire. Elena," Marcus's voice was thick with emotion, "I didn't know. No one did. The orphanage had the records, but I never talked about it. It hurt too much." She looked at him, really looked at him. "So when you made that promise, when you said you'd come back for me, it wasn't just about me being alone. It was about—" She stopped, trying to find the words. "It was about someone finally choosing to stay." Marcus pulled her into a hug, and Elena let herself be held. When was the last time someone had held her like this? Like she mattered, like she was worth coming back for. "I'm sorry I took so long," Marcus whispered against her hair. "I'm so sorry. You're here now. That's what matters." They stayed like that until the food went cold, until the afternoon light shifted through the windows, until Elena's tears dried and left salt on her cheeks. When they finally pulled apart, Marcus's eyes were red but determined. "I need to tell you something else," he said. Elena's stomach dropped. Here it comes, she thought. The catch, the condition, the thing that makes this all make sense. "When I turned 18, I came into my inheritance. The Blackwoods set up a trust fund, a substantial one, and I used part of it to hire investigators, not just to find you, but to find everyone from Riverside, every kid who was there during the fire." Elena's breath caught. "Why?" "Because we were family, all of us. We survived something terrible together, and then we were scattered like we never mattered." His voice was steady. "I found 12 of the 15 kids. Some are doing okay, some aren't, but I've been helping them, quietly, paying for education, medical bills, housing, whatever they need." Elena stared at him. "Why didn't you tell them it was you?" "Because I didn't want them to feel obligated. I didn't want it to be about me." He paused. "But I'm telling you because I need you to understand something. This isn't about guilt or obligation or trying to buy your forgiveness. This is about a promise I made when I was 8 years old to a girl who saved my life. And I'm going to keep that promise, Elena, every part of it, whether you let me back into your life or not." "Of course I'm letting you back in." The words came out before she could stop them. "Marcus, you're—" She laughed, shaky and disbelieving. "You're the only person who ever came back." He smiled, and it lit up his whole face. "Get used to it, because I'm not going anywhere." Elena believed him. For the first time in 20 years, she let herself believe. "So what happens now?" she asked. Marcus stood, offering her his hand. "Now, we start over. Properly, this time." "Start over how?" "Well, for starters, you're moving out of whatever apartment you're living in. I have a guest house on the property, fully furnished, private, yours for as long as you want it." "Marcus, I can't." "Yes, you can. And before you argue, this isn't charity. This is me making sure you're safe and taken care of while we figure out the rest." He squeezed her hand. "Please, Elena, let me do this. Let me keep at least part of my promise." She wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could take care of herself. But the truth was, she was tired. Tired of barely making rent, of choosing between groceries and electricity, of wondering if this month was the month she finally couldn't make it work. "Okay," she whispered. "Yeah? Yeah." She squeezed his hand back. "But just the guest house, and I'm getting a job, a real one. Deal. Though I'm going to warn you, I'm going to be very annoying about helping you find one."
Elena laughed, and it felt strange. When was the last time she'd laughed? Really laughed? "I can handle annoying." "Good." Marcus's expression turned serious. "Because there's one more thing. That other promise. The one you made." Elena's heart skipped. "Marcus." "I'm not asking you to marry me today, or tomorrow, or even next year." His eyes held hers. "But I need you to know that I'm serious about this, about us, about keeping every single promise we made when we were kids. So when you're ready, if you're ready, I'll be here." Elena couldn't breathe. This was insane. You didn't just reconnect with someone after 20 years and pick up where childhood promises left off. But looking at Marcus, at the sincerity in his eyes,
at the way he'd never stopped looking for her even when the world told him to move on. Maybe insane was exactly what she needed. "Okay," she said for the third time that day. And this time, she felt something she hadn't felt in 2 decades. Hope. This story is only getting started. If you're invested in Elena and Marcus, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next. And drop a like if you're rooting for them, because these two deserve their happy ending. Let me know in the comments, do you think they can really make this work? 6 months later, Elena stood in the guest house that had become home, staring at her reflection in the mirror. She barely recognized herself. Not because she looked different, though she did. Her face had filled out. The dark circles under her eyes had faded. She'd stopped looking over her shoulder like the world was about to pull the rug out from under her. But the real difference was in her eyes. For the first time in 20 years, she looked like someone who believed tomorrow might actually be better than today. "You ready?" Marcus's voice came from the doorway. Elena turned. He was leaning against the frame, hands in his pockets, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of one of his usual suits. She'd convinced him to dress down on weekends. Small victories. "I don't know. Am I?" They were going back, to Riverside, or what was left of it. The property had been abandoned after the fire, left to decay while the city argued over what to do with it. But 3 months ago, Marcus had bought it. All of it. The land, the building, everything. And now he wanted to rebuild it. Not as an orphanage, the foster system had changed too much for that, but as a community center, a place where kids aging out of foster care could find resources, support, housing if they needed it. A place where someone would always come back for them. Elena cried when he told her. Then she insisted on helping. "You don't have to come if you're not ready," Marcus said gently. "I can go alone, meet with the architects." "No," Elena grabbed her jacket. "I want to. I need to." They drove in comfortable silence. That was another thing that had changed. The silence between them didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt like peace. "Can I ask you something?" Elena said as they turned onto the old highway. "Always." "Do you ever regret it? Finding me, I mean? Your life was simpler before." Marcus glanced at her, then back at the road. "Do you regret pulling me through that window?" "Of course not." "Then why would I regret finding you?" He reached over and took her hand. "Elena, you're not a complication. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. The only real thing in a life that was all performance and expectation." Elena's throat tightened. "I'm still getting used to this. To you. To someone actually meaning what they say." "I know, and I'll keep proving it until you believe it." He squeezed her hand. "However long that takes." When they pulled up to the Riverside property, Elena's breath caught. It was worse than she remembered. The main building was a skeleton, blackened and hollow. Nature had reclaimed most of it. Vines crawling up the walls, trees growing through broken windows. It looked like a grave. "It's going to be beautiful," Marcus said, as if reading her mind. "I hired the best architects. We're keeping the bones of the original structure, but modernizing everything else. Green spaces, community gardens, a library, computer labs, counseling centers. Everything these kids need." Elena stared at the ruins. "Why, Marcus? Why spend all this money on a place that hurt us?" "Because it didn't just hurt us." His voice was quiet. "It also brought us together. And maybe we can turn that into something good. Maybe we can make sure no kid ever feels as alone as we did." They walked the property together, Marcus pointing out where things would go, Elena trying to reconcile her memories with his vision. The spot where they'd played became a recreation area. The place where she'd cried became a meditation garden. The window where she'd pulled him through would be preserved, with a plaque, in memory of those who survived and those who didn't. "There's one more thing," Marcus said as they stood in what used to be the courtyard. "I wanted to ask you something. Here, where it all started." Elena's heart began to race. "Marcus, wait." He pulled something from his pocket, not a ring box, an old, faded photograph. Elena gasped. It was them, 8 years old, sitting on the steps of the orphanage. She'd forgotten this picture existed. I found it in the archives, Marcus said softly. Took me 3 years and a lot of money, but I found it. Look at what you're holding. Elena looked closer. In the photo, child Elena was holding child Marcus's hand, and on both their faces, despite everything they'd been through, they were smiling. We were happy, she whispered, even then. We were together. That made us happy. Marcus took both her hands. Elena, I know this is fast. I know we're still figuring things out, but I also know that I've loved you since I was 8 years old, that I searched for you for half my life, that every good thing I've ever done was because I wanted to be the kind of man who deserved to keep his promise to you. Elena's eyes filled with tears. Marcus, I'm not asking you to decide anything today, but I need you to know. He reached into his other pocket and pulled out something small and silver, a ring, simple, beautiful. I bought this 3 months ago. It's been burning a hole in my pocket ever since, because every day I want to ask. Every day I want to make that childhood promise real. Then ask, Elena whispered. Marcus's eyes widened. What? Ask me, Marcus. Ask me the question you've been carrying around for 3 months. Elena, are you sure? We don't have to rush. We've been waiting 20 years. Elena was crying now, but she was smiling too. That's not rushing. That's finally catching up. Marcus knelt on the broken concrete right there in the ruins of the place where they'd first promised forever to each other. Elena Rodriguez, he said, his voice shaking, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life keeping the promise I made when I was 8 years old? Will you be my family, my home, my everything? Yes. The word came out choked with tears and laughter and 20 years of believing no one would ever come back for her. Yes, Marcus, I'll marry you. He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. Of course it did. Marcus had always paid attention to details. Then he stood and pulled her into his arms, and Elena let herself be held by the boy who'd promised, the man who'd searched, the person who'd never stopped believing they'd find each other again. I love you, Marcus whispered against her hair. I've loved you since before I knew what love was. I love you too, Elena pulled back to look at him, and I'm sorry it took me so long to say it. You had to learn to trust again. I understand. He kissed her forehead. We have the rest of our lives. We'll take it slow. Elena laughed. We're engaged. That's not exactly slow. Fair point. Marcus grinned, and she saw the boy she remembered. But we can take everything else slow. The wedding, the future, all of it. We'll figure it out together. Together. That word again. But this time, Elena didn't flinch away from it. This time, she leaned in. They stood there in the ruins of Riverside, 2 people who'd survived fire and loss and 20 years of loneliness, holding each other as the sun set behind them. What do you think the kids would say? Elena asked softly. The other kids, from back then, if they knew. I think they'd say we got our fairy tale. Marcus's voice was warm, and maybe that would give them hope that they could get theirs too. Is that what this is? A fairy tale? No. Marcus looked at her seriously. Fairy tales are easy. This is better. This is real. We're real. And he was right. This wasn't a fairy tale. Fairy tales didn't include scars and trauma and 20 years of separate survival. Fairy tales didn't include the hard work of learning to trust again, of believing that promises could actually be kept. But it was something better. It was 2 people who'd made a promise as children and kept it as adults. It was proof that sometimes, against all odds, the world gave you a second chance. And this time, they were taking it. 3 months later, they got married. Not in some grand cathedral or expensive venue. They got married right here at Riverside, in the courtyard where they'd played as children, where she'd saved him, where he'd promised to come back. The other survivors came, all 12 that Marcus had found. They stood as witnesses, these adults who'd been children together, who'd survived the fire and the system and all the ways the world tried to break them. And when Marcus and Elena exchanged vows, the same vows they'd made as children, plus new ones about partnership and trust and forever, there wasn't a dry eye in the place. "I promise to come back for you," Marcus said, his voice steady even though he was crying.
"I promise to wait for you," Elena responded, tears streaming down her face. Then they added the new vows, the adult ones, about being partners, about building a life, about keeping the promises that mattered. And when they kissed, sealing 20 years of waiting with a promise of forever, everyone cheered. Because this was more than a wedding. This was proof that promises kept had power, that sometimes, against all odds, people came back, that family wasn't just blood, it was the people who chose to stay. 6 months after that, the Riverside Community Center opened its doors. Elena ran it. Turned out she was good at administration, at connecting with kids who'd been through the system, at making sure no one fell through the cracks. Marcus funded it, but Elena gave it heart. And together they built something beautiful from the ashes of something painful, just like they'd built their life together. On the 1-year anniversary of their reunion, Elena stood in front of the window where she'd pulled Marcus through, the window that had been preserved, that now had a plaque reading, "Sometimes the broken places become the strongest." Marcus came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her. "What are you thinking?" he asked. Elena touched her scar, then reached back to touch his. "I'm thinking about that little girl who pulled a little boy through a window, who made him promise to come back. And I'm glad he kept his promise." She turned in his arms. "I'm glad we both did." Marcus kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. Not the promise of children, but the promise of adults who'd chosen each other every day for a year and would keep choosing each other for the rest of their lives. Some promises took 20 years to keep, but the ones worth keeping, they were worth the wait. If this story touched your heart, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button right now, not later, right now, because this channel is full of stories about hope, second chances, and promises kept. Smash that like button if you believe in happy endings that are earned, not given, and drop a comment telling me, have you ever had someone come back for you? Or are you still waiting for your person? Share your story. You never know who needs to hear it. Because here's the truth. We all deserve someone who comes back, someone who keeps their promises, someone who sees our scars and loves us anyway. Elena and Marcus found each other after 20 years. Maybe your person is looking for you too. Don't give up. The best promises are the ones worth waiting for.